Good day. So for today's discussion, we will be talking about systems development and program change activities, which is already chapter 5 of your IT auditing. So our objectives for this chapter are the following. First, be able to identify the stages in the SDLC or Systems Development Lifecycle. Be familiar with common problems that can lead to failure in the systems development process. Understand the importance of strategic system planning. Have a general understanding of how accountants participate in the SDLC. Be able to identify the basic features of both the structured and object-oriented approaches to systems design. Be able to identify and discuss the major steps involved in a cost-benefit analysis of proposed information systems, understand the advantages and disadvantages of commercial software option, and be able to discuss the decision-making process used to select commercial software. Second to the last is understand the purpose of a system walkthrough, and lastly is be familiar with the different types of system documentation and the purposes they serve. So in this chapter, which is chapter 5, it outlines the key activities that constitute the system development life cycle, or as I mentioned a while ago, SDLC. So the phases includes system planning, system analysis, conceptual design, system selection, detailed design, system implementation, and program change procedures, or systems maintenance. So we'll be discussing each phase one by one. But before that, let's talk first about the participants in a systems development. So who are the people that are involved when you are talking about systems development? So first, we have your systems professionals. So when you say systems professionals, they refer to your systems analysts, system engineers, and programmers. So these are the individuals that actually build the system. So they gather facts about problems with the current system, analyze these facts, and formulate a solution to solve the problem. So the product, of course, of the efforts of your systems professionals is your new system. Now, next participant is your end user. So end users are those for whom the system is built. By the name itself, end users. So there are many users at all levels in an organization. So they include the managers, the operations personnel, your accountants, your clerks, your internal auditors. There are even in some organizations that they allow external users to use their system. So again, it would depend. Now, during the systems development, systems professionals work with the primary user to obtain an understanding of the user's problems and a clear statement of their needs. Because again, who is the system made for? It is for the end user. So if you're trying to make a system that is not user friendly, so say gamit, diba? What is the purpose? Another participant is your stakeholders. So stakeholders are individuals either within or outside the organization who have an interest in the system but are not end users. So these include accountants, internal and external auditors, and internal steering committee that oversees systems development. And then lastly, we have the accountants or the auditors. So these are professionals who address the control and accounting and auditing issues for systems development. So this involvement should include internal auditors and IT auditors. So if you can remember, as discussed in the chapter 1, the Sarbanes-Oxley legislation prohibits external auditors from direct involvement in an audit client's system development activities because it seems like they will be auditing their own work or output, diba? So at least there is the external auditor will serve as a third party or an outside eye to your system. So, question, why are accountants and auditors involved with your SDLC? So, first, the creation of an information system entails significant financial transactions. So, second is that the second and more pressing concern for accountants and auditors is the nature of the products that emerge from your S emerge from your SDLC. So the quality of your accounting information rests directly on your systems development so or your SDLC activities, which in turn produce accounting information systems. So these systems deliver accounting information to internal and external users. So we've already talked about this in our previous discussions, no? So that is why accountants and your auditors are involved with your SDLC. So this should be SDLC. That's just a typographical error. Now, how are accountants involved with the SDLC? So first, of course, as mentioned in the participants, diba? Your accountants are also your users. So meaning, like all users, accountants must provide a clear picture of their problem and the needs to the system's professionals. So for example, accountants must specify accounting techniques to be used, internal control requirements such as audit trails, and special algorithms such as depreciation models. So only the accountants know what specific depreciation method is used, diba? Um, how much is the in relation to your tax computations or to your withholdings, diba? Those kinds of functions can be integrated in your system and is used by the accountants, or they are the ones who are knowledgeable of those things. So that is why they should be involved in your systems development lifecycle. Second is that accountants participate in the systems development as members of the development team. So their involvement often extends beyond the development of strictly AIS applications. So systems that do not process financial transactions directly may still draw from the accounting data. So the accountant may be consulted to provide advice or to determine if the proposed system constitutes an internal control risk. And the last reason or way is accountants are involved in systems development as auditors. So accounting information systems must be auditable. So that is why if in the number one, they are users which can in turn make suggestions as to audit trails, diba? Para your system would be auditable. Now, some computer audit techniques require special features that need to be designed into the system during the SDLC. So, we'll be talking deeper about these techniques in the coming chapters, specifically chapter 7 and 8. Next is the information systems acquisition. So, organizations usually acquire information in two ways. It's either they develop customized systems in-house through formal systems and develop activities, or they purchase commercial softwares from software vendors. So when we say in-house, with the name itself in-house, so it means that the the entity or the company really has a team that or a group of staff that works full time. So they include analysts and programmers who identify user information needs and satisfy their needs with customized systems. So for example, in the University of Cebu, we have an in-house team which can be found or is represented by our EDP, diba? So the people in our EDP, they provide in-house systems, for example, in our enrollment or the what do you call that? The the system used by the cashier department or the registrar department. So those are customized or made by the EDP specifically for the university. Aside from in-house, it can also be a commercial system. So, by the name itself, commercial, diba, there is already an existing system that is available in the market, and then the company would just purchase it. So that's what you mean by commercial systems. Now, what are the trends in commercial systems? So there are four factors that have stimulated the growth of commercial software market. First is the relatively low cost of general commercial software as compared to your customized software. Second is the emergence of industry-specific vendors who target their software to needs of particular types of businesses. Third is a growing demand for businesses that are too small to afford in-house systems development staff. And lastly, the trend towards downsizing of organizational units and the resulting move toward the distributed data processing environment. So these are the common reasons why there is a significant increase or growth in the usage of commercial systems. Now, what are the different types of your commercial systems? So you have the turnkey, the backbone, and the vendor supported systems. So under the turnkey systems, these are systems that are completely finished and tested systems that are already ready for implementation. So these are often general purpose systems or systems customized to a specific industry. Now, turnkey systems are usually sold only as a compiled program modules, and users have limited ability to customize them to their specific needs. Now, one type of turnkey system is the general accounting system, which are designed to serve a wide variety of user needs. By the term itself, general accounting. So by mass producing a standard system, the vendor is able to reduce the unit cost of these systems to a fraction of in-house development costs. So to provide as much flexibility as possible, general accounting systems are designed in modules. If makabantay mo sa inyong SAP, if you can remember, di ba, naka-modules siya, you have your sales, you have your purchases, di ba? So, ina siya. Those are general accounting systems. This allows users to purchase the modules that meet their specific needs. Now, typical modules include accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, inventory control, general ledger, financial reporting, and fixed asset. Next, we have the special purpose systems. So, these are systems that target selected segments of the economy. So, for example, in the medical field, diba, or the banking industry or the government agencies, they have unique accounting systems. So they do not specifically follow, or doesn't mean that they not follow, but aside from the general accounting system, they have additional procedures or rules or regulations that they need to do aside from, again, as mentioned, general accounting or general purpose accounting systems. So that is why software vendors have developed special purpose systems for those industries who are also involved in specialized industries. Next, we have the office automation systems. So these are computer systems that improve the productivity of office workers, examples of which include office automation systems like word processing packages, database management systems, spreadsheet programs, and desktop publishing systems. Now, another type of commercial system is your backbone system. So, backbone system provides a basic system structure on which to build. So, by the name itself, backbone siya. So, if you relate it to a human body, it's like your spinal cord, like that. So the vendor the vendor designs and programs the user interface to suit the client's needs. So the vendor already has a base program or the backbone program, and then the vendor just tweaks the program in accordance with what the client needs, or what is applicable to the client. So again, you just have a backbone system or like a basis, and then you just add or deduct something from the system to accommodate what the client needs or what the client wants to have in its system. Then another type of commercial system is your vendor supported systems. So vendor supported systems are hybrids of custom systems and commercial software. So again, hybrid of your in-house and your commercial systems. Excuse me. So under this type, the vendor develops and maintains custom systems for its clients. So the systems themselves are custom products, but the system development service is commercially provided. So what does it mean? There are companies who provide services to clients, and they serve as the client's in-house staff. However, they are not technically in-house because they are not the your programmers, or your system analysts are not technically hired or are not technically employees by the company, but they are just the company has a contract with a third party or the commercial provider of that system, which will again serve as your per se in-house or provide you the customized system that your company needs. So that's what you call vendor supported system. So examples of this is there are SAP, there are companies who provide SAP or vendor supported systems like SAP to their clients. So that's what happened in my previous company. So our in-house staff was a SAP provider, specifically AGS. So that is an example of a vendor supported system. Next, let's move on to the advantages and disadvantages of your commercial software. So first advantage of your commercial software is, of course, implementation time. So unlike your customized system, which often takes a long time to develop, commercial softwares are already readily available. So meaning they can be, especially if you are just needing um, general accounting systems, diba? So they are just readily available. So if you want it to be implemented immediately, it can be done, diba? So meaning your company or the user doesn't necessarily have to wait. Another advantage is cost. In comparison to your customized commercial softwares or commercial systems are less costly or less expensive in comparison to your in-house systems. Now, reliability, it is an advantage because most of the commercial systems that are already available or commercial software packages that are already available in the market has already been tested by different kinds of users. They have gone different kinds of testing already, or they have been scrutinized already, diba? So some of which already have there are already testimonies or vouchers from other users who really can attest that that system can be reliable. So meaning the user would least likely encounter any system errors or any malfunctions in the system if they are to acquire a commercial software. So unlike if you are doing customized, since let's say especially if you are starting from scratch, diba? So the company or the system itself would really undergo a lot of debuggings, would undergo a lot of systems errors or mga those technical IT things, diba? Since again you are starting from scratch. So that also adds to the implementation time. So that is one. Now, the disadvantages of your commercial software is independence. Why? Especially if you are purchasing the vendor supported system wherein a third party will serve as your in-house development team, diba? So the user runs the risk that the vendor will cease to support the system or even go out of business. Now, since the company is dependent to that vendor for their commercial software, so meaning if something happens to the vendor or the company of the vendor or your um your provider, diba? So it would affect the operations of your company as well. So that is a question on independence. Next is the need for customized systems. So again, if the company is a specialized or is dealing or is in a specialized industry, of course, there is a need for them to really customize. So, not all commercial softwares can accommodate the needs of those industries who are dealing with special cases or who are in specialized industries. So, those super complicated industries usually needs complicated systems as well or customized systems. And then another disadvantage is maintenance. So business information systems undergo frequent changes. So if the users need change, it may be difficult or even impossible to modify commercial software. Because again, you are just acquiring it from a third party. So unlike if you have in-house development or if you are into customized systems, if you want to have changes to your system, it can be applied right away or you can make such changes because again, you make your own rules in a customized system. So you can apply what you want to apply right away to your system because again, you own it, diba? So unlike in a commercial software wherein you cannot make such changes because you don't have the license or you are not authorized and so on and so forth. So you need to undergo a lot of steps first before you can make changes to your commercial software. So that's it. Now let's start talking in detail about the systems development lifecycle. So the objectives and sequence of your SDLC activities are logical and generally accepted by experts in the systems community and are generally treated as best practices for systems development. So as you can see here, you have the following steps to your SDLC. You have systems planning, analysis, conceptual design, system selection, detailed design, programming and testing, implementation, and the maintenance. And then the following here are your documentations or the outputs in each phase of your SDLC. So new systems development involves conceptual steps that can apply to any problem-solving process. So that is identify the problem, excuse me, understand what needs to be done, consider alternative solutions, select the best solution, and implement the solution. So basically, if you are creating a new system, it's just like answering a problem. So except there are more details to it, or there are more steps. So the systems maintenance, which is the last part, constitutes the organization's program change procedures. So it begins once the 7 phases are complete and the system is fully implemented. So let's start with phase 1, which is your systems planning. So the objective of systems planning is to link individual system projects or applications to the strategic objectives of the firm. So the basis for the systems plan is the organization's business plan, which specifies where the firm plans to go and how it will get there. So let's look at this figure. So as you can see here, this figure presents the relationship between the plans, the strategic objectives of the firm, and yeah, so the strategic objectives of the firm and the plans, either business systems or systems projects, both areas should be in congruence. So again, there must be congruence between the individual projects, the business plan, and the systems project, or the firm may fail to meet its objectives. If there is no congruence among the three, so the firm would not achieve its objectives. So again, goal congruence is important in systems planning. So who should do systems planning? Now, most firms take systems planning seriously and establish a systems steering committee, which includes the following. So you have CEO, CFO, CIO, senior management, internal auditor, senior management from computer services. So these are the common members of your steering committee. Now, again, it will depend on the company on who are the people that they want to be involved in their steering committee. So the purpose of the steering committee is to provide guidance and review the status of systems projects. So the responsibilities of your steering committee include resolving conflicts that arise from new systems, reviewing projects and assigning priorities, budgeting funds for systems development, reviewing the status of individual systems under development, and determining at various checkpoints. Now, systems planning occurs at 2 levels. You have your strategic systems planning and your project planning. When we say strategic systems planning, it involves the allocation of systems resources at macro level. So it usually deals with a time frame of 3 to 5 years. And this process is similar to budgeting resources for other strategic activities such as product development, plant expansion, market research, and manufacturing technology. So why do we perform strategic systems planning? Now, there are four reasons or justifications why we need to perform strategic systems planning. First, a plan that changes constantly is better than no plan at all. So strategic planning charts the path the firm will follow to reach its information systems goal. Even if it means making many mid-course adjustments, planning is superior to simply wandering in the wilderness. So again, it's better to have a plan than no plan at all. Another justification is strategic planning reduces the crisis component in systems development. So a formal plan is a model for identifying and prioritizing users' needs. It allows management to consider the future needs, recognize problems in their early stages, and even anticipate needs before the symptoms of underlying problems emerge. Now, in the absence of a plan, the trigger that stimulates system development is the recognition of a problem. So often, the problem reach a crisis level before they receive attention, which adversely affects the quality of the solution. So strategic planning provides a structured means of separating legitimate needs from desires and needs from or needs versus your problems. Third reason is that strategic systems planning provides authorization control for the SDLC. So the strategic systems plan lays out authorization rules to ensure that decisions to develop specific systems are congruent with the objectives of the firm. Now, investing in the wrong systems can be just as damaging to a firm as investing in the wrong plant and equipment. The last justification is the cost management. So, systems planning has proven to be a cost-effective means of managing systems projects and application development. Now, the next level of systems planning is your project planning. So, the purpose of project planning is to allocate resources to individual applications within the framework of the strategic plan. So the basic purpose of project planning is to, again, allocate scarce resources to specific projects. Now, the product of this phase consists of two formal documents, which is your project proposal and your project schedule. When you say project proposal, it provides management with a basis for deciding whether to proceed with the project. So the formal proposal serves two purposes. First, it summarizes the findings of the study. Which is conducted into a general recommendation for a new or modified system. And then another purpose is that the proposal outlines the linkage between the objectives of the proposed system and the business objectives of the firm, especially those that is outlined in the IT strategic plan of the company. Now, your project schedule represents management's commitment to the project. So, the project schedule is a budget of the time and cost for all the phases of the SDLC. So, the project proposal and your project schedule go hand in hand. So, what is seen in your proposal is placed into a schedule. So, now, what is the role of your auditor in systems planning? Now, the auditors routinely examine the systems planning phase of the SDLC. Planning greatly reduces the risk that an organization has produced unneeded, inefficient, ineffective, and fraudulent systems, which is what the auditor is concerned about. Therefore, both the internal and external auditors are interested in ensuring that adequate systems planning takes place. So, that is the end of your phase 1. Now, let's move on to phase 2, which is your systems analysis. So, systems analysis is actually a two-step process involving first a survey of the current system, then second, an analysis of the user's needs. So, systems analysis is the foundation for the rest of your SDLC. Now, the deliverable from this phase is a formal systems analysis report which presents the findings of the analysis and recommendations for the new system. So, let's start with the first step, which is the survey step. So, the survey step, by the name itself, survey, which is, I think it's already self-explanatory, but the survey step is wherein the analyst refers to a system survey wherein they gather information or facts about the specific problem they are dealing with. So, again, the analyst obtains a understanding of the problem, and then he or she develops a more specific questions for which more facts must be gathered. So, this process would go on through several iterations, and when all relevant facts have been gathered and analyzed, the analyst already arrives at an assessment of the current system. So, surveying the current system has both advantages and disadvantages. So, the disadvantage, as mentioned in the slide, is that first you have the current physical tar pit. So, this term is used to describe the tendency of the part of the analyst to be sucked in and then bogged down by the task of surveying the current dinosaur system. Second disadvantage is thinking inside the box. So some argue that current system surveys stifle new ideas. By studying and modeling the old system, the analyst may develop a constrained notion about how the new system should function. The result is an improved old system rather than a radically new approach, which is usually the case. Now, the advantages of surveying the current system is at first identifying what aspects the old system should be kept. So, some elements of the system may be functionally sound and can provide the foundation for the new system. By fully understanding the current system, the analyst can identify those aspects worth preserving or modifying for use in the new system. Second advantage is forcing systems analysts to fully understand the system. And then the last advantage is isolating the root of the problem's symptoms. So by surveying the current system, the analyst may determine conclusively the cause of the reported problem symptoms. So those are your advantages and disadvantages if you are surveying the current system. Now, I mentioned earlier in the survey staff, or no, in the survey step, it involves gathering of facts. So when you gather facts, they can or they can be categorized into the following. So they can be what you call data sources. So these include internal entities such as customers or vendors, as well as internal sources, which is from your other departments. So your system's facts may also include your users, which include both managers and operations users. They can also refer to your data stores, which are your files, databases, accounts, and source documents. Systems facts may also refer to your processes, data flows, controls, transaction volumes, error rates, resource costs, bottlenecks, and redundant operations. So, since we are already talking about fact gathering, about there are several techniques as to how you can gather facts. So we have observation, which of course involves passively watching the physical procedures of the system. So this allows the analyst to determine what gets done, who performs a task, when they do them, how they do them, why they do them, and how long they take. So basically, you're just observing. You are not involving yourself into the process. Next is task participation, wherein aside from observing, or it goes beyond observing. The observing is you're just outside. Since you in participation, when you say participation, the analyst already takes an active role in performing the user's task. So this allows the analyst to experience firsthand the problems involved in the operation of the current systems. Now, another gathering technique is your personal interviews. So of course, you already know what interview is. It can be open-ended or through questionnaires. So when you say open-ended, the respondent is allowed to elaborate on the problem as they see it and offer suggestions and recommendations. So usually open-ended questions are like why or how or what do you feel and so on and so forth. So those are your open-ended. No, now in this type of, if you are to use this type of questions, that you as the analyst must be a good listener and be able to focus on the important facts. Now, questionnaires, on the other hand, ask more specific, detailed questions and restrict the user's response. So questionnaires, some of which you just have to answer yes or no, or rate it specifically from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, diba? Your answers are just limited, or you have options or choices. So another technique is reviewing key documents. So key documents include organizational charts, job descriptions, accounting records, policies, chart of accounts, financial statements, performance reports, or systems flow charts, logs, budgets, forecasts. So these can be sources of your data, or yeah, that is your key documents. Now, following the fact-gathering phase, the analyst formally documents his or her impressions and their understanding of the system. Now, this will take the form of notes, systems flow charts, and data flow diagrams. So, after the survey step, we move on to the analysis step. So systems analysis is an intellectual process that is commingled with fact gathering. The analyst is simultaneously analyzing as he or she gathers facts. The mere recognition of a problem presumes some understanding of the norm or desired state. So it is therefore difficult to identify where the survey ends and the analysis begins. So as mentioned a while ago, the deliverable for your analysis step is your systems analysis report. So this marks the conclusion of the systems analysis phase. It presents to management or the steering committee the survey findings, the problems identified with the current system, the user's needs, and the requirements of the new system. So this document, or the systems analysis report, constitutes a formal contract that specifies the objectives and goals of the system. It should also establish in clear terms the data sources, the users, the data files, the general processes, data flows, controls, and transaction volume capacity. However, your systems analysis report does not specify the detailed design of the proposed system. So, the detailed design of your proposed system is already in your next phase na siya. Now, what is the role of your auditor in the systems analysis? So, the accountant or the auditor, excuse me, should be involved in the needs analysis of the proposed system to determine if it is a good candidate for the advanced audit features, and if so, which features are best suited for the system. So let's move on to your phase 3, which is conceptual systems design. So the purpose of the conceptual design phase is to produce several alternative conceptual systems that satisfy the system's requirements identified during your systems analysis. So there are two approaches to conceptual systems design. You have the structured approach and the object-oriented approach. So let's start with your structured approach. So your structured design approach is a disciplined way of designing systems from the top down. So it consists of starting with the big picture of the proposed system that is gradually decomposed into more and more detail until it is fully understood. So under this system, or under this approach, the business process under design is usually documented by data flow and structure diagrams. So that is your structured design approach. Oops. So next is your object-oriented approach. So in your object-oriented approach, it is to build, information systems from reusable standard components or objects. So unlike your structured, you are starting from scratch. Your object-oriented, you have already a basis for your system. So this approach may be equated to the process of building an automobile. So if you know, in automobile, car manufacturers do not create each new model from scratch. Actually, new models are built from standard components that also go into other models, and then they just add specific features to make it unique from other models. However, the basis or the foundation is just the same. They are just from a standard component. So, the concept of reusability is central to the object-oriented approach to systems design. So, what is the auditor's role in conceptual design? Now, the auditor is a stakeholder in all financial systems and thus has an interest in the conceptual design stage of the system. The auditability of a system depends in part on its design characteristics. Some computer auditing techniques require systems to be designed with special audit features that are integral to the system. These audit features must be specified at the conceptual design stage. Now, next phase is your system evaluation and selection. So this phase is an optimization process that seeks to identify the best system. So if you go back to the problem solving steps, this is already where you evaluate your alternatives. So this decision represents a critical juncture in the SDLC. At this point, there is a great deal of uncertainty about the system. And a poor decision here can be disastrous. So the purpose of a formal evaluation and selection procedure is to structure this decision-making process and thereby reduce both uncertainty and the risk of making a poor decision. Now, the evaluation and selection process involves two steps. First is perform a detailed feasibility study, and second is perform a cost-benefit analysis. So let's start with performing a detailed feasibility study. So in this part, there are 5 aspects of project feasibility that needs to be considered. So by assessing the major constraints on the proposed system, management can evaluate the project's likelihood for success before committing large amounts of financial and human resources. So these aspects are the following. You have your technical, economic, legal, operational, and schedule feasibility. When you talk about technical feasibility, it is concerned with whether the system can be developed under existing technology or if new technology is needed. So, as a general proposition, the technology in the marketplace is most far ahead of most firms' ability to apply it. Therefore, from an availability viewpoint, technical feasibility is not usually an issue. For most firms, the real issue is their desire and ability to apply available technology. Given the technology is a physical basis for most of the system's design features, this aspect bears heavily on the overall feasibility of the competing system. Now, next aspect is your economic feasibility. So this pertains to the availability of funds to complete the project. So at this point, we are concerned with management's financial commitment to the project in view of other competing capital projects under consideration. Another aspect is your legal feasibility, which identifies any conflicts between the conceptual system and the company's ability to charge its legal responsibilities. Another aspect is your operational feasibility, which shows the degree of compatibility between the firm's existing procedures and personal skills and the operational requirements of the new system. So, implementing the new system may require adopting new procedures and retraining operations personnel. The last aspect is your schedule feasibility, which relates to the firm's ability to implement the project within an acceptable time frame. Another is the performance of a cost benefit analysis. So, cost benefit analysis helps management determine whether and by how much the benefits received from a proposed system will outweigh its costs. So this technique is frequently used for estimating the expected financial value of the business investments. However, in this case, the investment is an information system and the costs and benefits are more difficult to identify and quantify than those of traditional capital projects. Now, there are three steps in the application of your cost-benefit analysis. First is you identify the cost. So, it's either you identify if they are one-time costs or recurring costs. Now, one-time costs involve the initial investment to develop and implement the systems, while recurring costs include operating and maintenance costs that recur over the life of the system. Next step is identifying the benefits. So, these benefits may be tangible or intangible. So, when you say tangible benefits, they can either increase the revenue or reduce the cost. While intangible benefits refer to those benefits that are often of overriding importance in information systems and they cannot be easily measured and quantified. So examples of intangible benefits include increased customer satisfaction, improved employee satisfaction, and so on. And the last step is comparing cost and benefit. So there are two methods in evaluating the cost and benefits. So again, these are financial methods, Tanisha. You have the NPV and your payback method, which I know these are not new to you because we've already discussed this in your finance subject. So NPV is the present value of the cost that is deducted from the present value of the benefits over the life of the system. And then your payback method is, of course, it's like payback method is a version of your break-even analysis. So, wherein the break-even point is the point in which the total cost equals to the total benefits. Next is preparing the systems selection report. So, again, the deliverable product of the system selection process is, of course, your system selection report. So, this formal document consists of a revised feasibility study, a cost-benefit analysis, and a list and explanation of intangible benefits for each alternative design. Now, on the basis of this report, the steering committee will select a single system that will go forward to the next phase of the SDLC, which is your detailed design. Now, what is the role of the auditor in the evaluation and selection? So, this include the auditor should ensure five things. Only escapable costs are used in calculation of cost-saving benefits. Reasonable interest rates are used in measuring present values. One-time and recurring costs are completely and accurately reported. Realistic useful lives are used in comparing competing projects, and intangible benefits are assigned reasonable financial values. Next phase is our detailed design. So the purpose of the detailed design phase is to produce a detailed description of the proposed system that both satisfies the system requirements identified during systems analysis and is in accordance with the conceptual design. So in this phase, all system components, which includes user views, database tables, processes, and controls, are meticulously specified. Now, at the end of the phase, these components are presented formally in a detailed design report. Now, included in the detailed design is the performance of a system design walkthrough. After completing the detailed design, the development team usually performs a system design walkthrough to ensure that the design is free from conceptual errors that could become programmed into the final system. Excuse me. So many firms have formal structured walkthroughs conducted by a quality assurance group. Next step is the review of the system documentation. So the detailed design report documents and describes the system to this point. This report includes the following. So just read it at your own time. No? So those are some of the components that can be found in your detailed design report. Now again, the detailed design report is the product of your detailed design stage. Next phase is the application programming and testing. So this stage is to select a programming language from among the various languages available and suitable to the application. So these include procedural languages, event-driven languages, and object-oriented programming languages. So when we say procedural languages, these requires a programmer to specify the precise order in which the program log is executed. So procedural languages are often called third generation languages or 3GLs. Examples of which include COBOL, Fortran, C, and PL1. Now, event-driven languages are no longer procedural. So under this model, the program's code is not executed in a predefined sequence. Instead, external actions or events that are initiated by the user dictate the control flow of the program. So the most common or most popular example of a event-driven language is Microsoft Visual Basic. The last type of language is object-oriented programming language or OOP. So the most popular true OOP language are Java and Smalltalk. So the learning curve of the OOP language is steep. The time and cost of retooling for OOP is the greatest impediment to the transition process. Now, regardless of the programming language used, modern programs should follow a modular approach. So this technique produces small programs that perform narrowly defined tasks. Now, the following benefits are associated with your modular programming. So that is programming efficiency, maintenance efficiency, and control. Next step is testing the application software. So all program modules must be thoroughly tested before they are implemented. Now, there are some proven concepts about testing that should be followed by a systems developer and considered by auditors in conducting audits. So first is, of course, you need to test the methodology or the process on how the system was made. So the result of the tests are then compared against predetermined results to identifying programming and logic errors. Next is you will test or you will do offline testing before deploying it online. So the first point is that in the first point that is critical in testing is to never underestimate the principle of testing offline before deploying a system online. Implementing a system without testing offline is an invitation to disaster. So at least you need, if by testing it offline, is that the company may identify certain problems already that they have not seen in the previous phases. And then lastly is testing the data. So creating meaningful test data is an extremely time-consuming aspect of program testing. Now, to facilitate future testing, test data prepared during the implementation phase should be retained for reuse. This test data will give the auditor a frame of reference for designing and evaluating future audit tasks. Next phase, second to the last phase, is our system implementation. So in the system implementation phase of the systems development process, database structures are created and populated with data. Equipment is purchased and installed. Employees are trained, and the system is documented, and the new system is installed. So this implementation process engages the efforts of designers, programmers, database administrators, users, and accountants. So the activities in this phase entails extensive costs and will often consume more personal hours than all other pre-implementation phases of your SDLC. So in your system implementation is, of course, you undergo testing the entire system. So when all modules have been coded and tested, they must be brought together and tested as a whole. So the procedure involves processing hypothetical data through the system. So na ay test run from the starting input data down to the processing and then down to the output or the mga reports na ma-generate sa imuhang system. Now, the outputs of the systems are then reconciled with predetermined results, and the test is documented to provide evidence of the system's performance. So, if there are discrepancies, meaning you can assume that there is something wrong with the system. However, if the predetermined result matches with the what is the result of the test run, so you can say that the system is working well. Now, finally, when those conducting the test are satisfied with the results, they should then complete a formal acceptance document. So, the user acceptance document becomes important in reconciling differences and assigning responsibility during the post-implementation review of the system. Next is documenting the system. So the system's documentation provides the auditor with essential information about how the system works. The documentation requirements of three groups, which include systems designers and programmers, computer operators, and end users, are of particular importance. So first, we have the designer and programmer documentation. So systems designers and programmers need documentation in order to debug errors and perform maintenance on the system. So this group is involved with the system on a highly technical level, which requires both general and detailed information. So, another documentation needed is for the operator documentation, wherein computer operators use documentation called a run manual, which describes how to run the system. So the typical contents of a run manual include the name of the system, the run schedule, the required hardware devices, file requirements, list of users, and so on and so forth. The last type of documentation is your user documentation, wherein users need documentation describing how to use the systems. So usually users are divided into classes. Examples of possible class schemes is novices, occasional users, frequent light users, or frequent power users. So whatever kind of user you may be, it is expected that your system should have a user handbook. So your user handbook includes the instructions on how you can use the system or the overview of the system, the functions involved in the system, descriptions of procedures with step-by-step visual references. So, ano siya? If in your SAP, di ba, you have your manual. I don't know if you still have a manual. But di ba, the handbook is sort of like your manual if you are talking about SAP or your QuickBooks, di ba? That you need to follow a certain step in order to how you can generate an accounts payable voucher or how you can generate a income statement. So there are step by step on where the user can go, where to click, what to click, and so on and so forth, di ba? So that is included in your user handbook. Now, another documentation is your online documentation. Now, online documentations may include already tutorials. So, let's say video tutorials that the user can refer to. Another is help features, wherein there is a what do you call that? There is a button in your system that allows you to walk through or diba, if you start a new game, you are still in the tutorial stage, diba? Marag na ingon ana ba nga feature. So that is a form of documentation. Now, next is converting the databases. So, database conversion is a critical step in the implementation phase. This is a transfer of data from its current form to the format or medium required by the new system. So, the degree of conversion depends on the technology leap from the old system to the new one. So, in any case, data conversion is risky and must be carefully controlled. So, the following precautions should be taken. First, you have the validation, wherein your old database must be validated first before conversion. So, this requires analyzing each class of data to determine whether it should be reproduced in the new database. Second precaution is your reconciliation. So, after the conversion action, the new database must be reconciled against the original one. And the last precaution is your backup. So, original copy or copies of the original files must be kept as backup against discrepancies in the converted data, and especially if there may be mishaps or lapses when you are to transfer the data. So, at least you have something to go back to. Next is converting to the new system. So, the process of converting from the old system to the new one is called the cut over. So, a system cutover will usually follow one of three approaches. So, you have the cold turkey cutover, phased cutover, and the parallel operation cutover. When we say cold turkey cutover, or this is also called the Big Bang approach, the firm switches to the new system and simultaneously terminates the old system. So when implementing simple systems, this is often the easiest and least costly approach. And with more complex systems, it is the riskiest. So cold turkey cutover is akin to skydiving without a reserve parachute. So as long as the main parachute functions properly, there is no problem. But things don't always work the way they are supposed to. System errors that were not detected during the walkthrough and testing steps may materialize unexpectedly. And without a backup system, an organization can find itself unable to process transactions and meet its obligations to customers and creditors. So that's the first one. Second is a phase cutover, wherein sometimes an entire system cannot or need not to be cut over at once. So the phase cutover begins operating the new system in modules or by phases. So by phasing in the new system in modules, we reduce the risk of devastating systems failures. However, the phase approach can create incompatibilities between new subsystems and yet to be replaced old subsystems. So this problem may be alleviated by implementing special conversion systems that provide temporary interfaces during the cutover period. And the last approach is the parallel operation cutover, which involves running the old system and the new system simultaneously for a period of time. So this approach is the most time-consuming and costly of the three. Running two approaches in parallel essentially doubles resource consumption. However, the advantage of the parallel cutover is the reduction of risk. So by running the two systems, the user can reconcile outputs to identify errors and debug errors before running the new system solo. So what is the auditor's role in system implementation? So external auditors are prohibited again by SOX legislation from direct involvement in system implementation. However, as the preceding discussion has already suggested, the role of internal auditors in the detailed design and implementation phases should be significant. Being a stakeholder in all financial systems, internal users should lend their expertise to this process to guide and shape the finished system. Specifically, internal auditors may get involved in the following ways: either provide technical expertise, specify documentation standards, or verify control adequacy and compliance with SOX. Next is post-implementation review. So the review is conducted by an independent team to measure the success of the system and of the process after the dust has settled. So the post-implementation review of a newly installed system can provide management with insights into two ways to improve the process for future systems. It can also provide auditors, both internal and external, with evidence regarding the adequacy of the SDLC in general and the risks associated with a particular system. The last phase is your systems maintenance. So systems maintenance is a formal process by which application programs undergo changes to accommodate changes in user needs. So maintenance represents a significant resource outlay compared to initial development costs over a system's lifespan. As much as 80 to 90% of its total cost may be incurred in the maintenance phase. Next, we have controlling new systems development. So these 5 controllable activities deal with the authorization, development, and implementation of the original systems. And then later on, we will be talking about control activities that pertain to your system's maintenance procedures. So first is you have your systems authorization activities. So it should make sure that all systems must be properly authorized to ensure their economic justification and feasibility. Next, user specification activities. So this means that users must be actively involved in the system's development design, and then their involvement should not be stifled because the proposed system is technically complex. So regardless of the technology involved, the user can and should provide a detailed written description of the logical needs that must be satisfied by the system. Another activity is the technical design. So the technical design activity translates the user specifications into a set of detailed technical specifications of a system that meets the user's needs. So the scope of these activities include systems analysis, general systems design, feasibility analysis, and detailed systems design. Another activity is your internal audit participation. So the internal auditor plays an important role in the control of systems development activities, particularly in organizations whose users lack technical expertise. So the internal auditor can serve as a liaison between users and the systems professionals to ensure an effective transfer of knowledge. Last is user test and acceptance procedures. So just before implementation, the individual modules of the system must be tested as a unified whole. So a test team comprising of user personnel, systems professionals, and internal audit personnel subjects the system to rigorous testing. Now, once the test team is satisfied that the system meets its stated requirements, the system is formally accepted by the users' departments. Now, what are the audit objectives related to your new systems development? So, first is verify the SDLC activities are applied consistently and in accordance with management's policies. Determine that the systems are systems as originally implemented was free from material errors and fraud, confirm that the system was judged to be necessary and justified at various checkpoints throughout the SDLC, and verify that systems documentation is sufficiently accurate and complete to facilitate audit and maintenance services. Now, the following are the audit procedures that are related to your new systems development. So, just read it in your own time because there are quite many. There. So, next, let's move on to our activities which controls systems maintenance. So, first, we have here the maintenance authorization, testing, and documentation. So, the benefits achieved from controlling new systems development can be quickly lost during systems maintenance if control does not continue into that phase. Access to the systems for maintenance purposes increases the possibility of systems errors, and logic may be corrupted either by the accidental introduction of errors or intentional acts of defraud. Another activity is the source program library controls. So, in large computer systems, application program source code is stored on magnetic disk called the source program library or SPL. Now, the arrangement, now your SPL, if it has no control or what we consider as your worst case situation, or the following, no, erase. The your SPL, if it is considered as a worst case situation, is when your SPL has technically no controls, or SPLs without controls. So this arrangement has the potential to create the following two serious forms of exposures. So first exposure, if your SPL has no control, is the access to programs is completely unrestricted. So meaning again, since your SPL has no controls, there is no restrictions. So programmers and others can access any programs stored in the library, and there is no provision for detecting an authorized intrusion. So another exposure is that because of these control weaknesses, programs are subject to unauthorized changes, because again, there is no restriction, so anybody can just access the SPLs. And then remember, your SPL is your source code or your application program source code. So meaning anybody can just make changes there which can impact or which can cause errors, or if it has intentions to defraud, or the changes was made with the intentions to defraud, so the people that are involved can truly defraud your system. So that is why it is really important that your SPL should be controlled, or you should have controls to your SPL. Now, to control the SPL, protective features and procedures must be explicitly addressed, and this requires the implementation of an SPL management system. So, this software is used to control four routine but critical functions. First is the storing programs on the SPL. Next is retrieving programs for maintenance purposes, deleting obsolete programs from the library, and documenting program changes to provide an audit trail of the changes. So these are the four areas that really need to be taken into consideration, when you are using an SPL management system. Now, what are the audit objectives related to systems maintenance? To detect unauthorized program maintenance which may have resulted in significant processing errors and frauds. So, we need to determine that maintenance procedures protect applications from unauthorized changes Thus, again, you make use of SPL management systems to avoid such things. Then, applications, determine that applications are free from material errors. And lastly, determine that program libraries are protected from unauthorized access. Now, audit procedures related to your system's maintenance. First is the identification of unauthorized changes. So to do this, you can apply certain tests of controls like reconciling program version numbers, confirming maintenance authorizations. Another procedure is identifying application errors, wherein you can do the following test of controls like reconciling the source code, reviewing test results, and retesting the programs. And the last procedure is test access to libraries, which you can do the following test of controls, which is review programmer authority tables and test authority tables. So the auditor's objective in testing controls over these processes, I mentioned those phases, is to establish application integrity and thus limit the test of applications control and substantive testing that needs to be done by an external auditor. So, the systems development and maintenance process is common to all applications, and together they establish the accuracy of new applications and preserve their integrity throughout the period under review. So that ends the discussion on systems development and program change activities. If you have questions, you can post it in the group chat.